First item of business is the approval of our routine items. So in your packets, you'll see the minutes of the regular meeting on February 8th, as well as the minutes for the Committee on Special Education for the multiple dates listed. And there are no minutes for the Committee on Preschool Special Education. So those are our routine items. Are there any questions or discussion on those items? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve those items.
So moved.
Thank you, Crystal. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Heidi. All those in favor? Aye. Great, that will carry. Do we have any public comments this evening? Sure, come on in, Jen.
Good evening.
Hi.
I have to tell you, just as a little positive feedback or constructive feedback, this is a tough spot to sit in, right? Just to be a lady with us. Anyways, I just wanted to thank all of you and let you know just how incredibly excited the teachers are to have an opportunity this year to propose different electives for our students, engaging new, exciting new course offerings. And I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about the process for selecting, those electives, what will be taught in our schools.
I'm sorry, your question is, what is the board's process for selecting electives? I think I don't know if the board has a process. I think the process is that you should work with your building principal and work with the superintendent. And, the board has a policy on curriculum development, but they also entrust, Dan and the superintendent and, the day-to-day operators and the principals to help, guide that work.
Does the curriculum committee meet and discuss?
We don't have a curriculum committee. We haven't had a curriculum committee in 3 years.
Okay, I guess I wasn't aware of that.
Yep.
Is just curious when 3 years ago that ended. I wasn't aware. I guess, in the fog of COVID, we've all been
Sure.
busy getting through. And I just, I was, as we were putting together ideas for curriculum, I know in the past we've always had to present to the curriculum committee to make sure that our offerings were something in line with.
Sure. In the 2 years that I was on the board, and Mark, I don't know, you can chime in if you think I'm wrong, but in the 2 years that I was on the board that the curriculum committee was active, I don't know that it ever met as a group. So as you know, in the last 3 years, we've restructured how our committees meet. So instead of meeting as, one large committee where every board member sits on committees, there's actual working committees that work in breakout sessions. And when we made that restructure, this group decided not to have a curriculum committee.
Okay, so then, again, can you tell me what is the process for
developing curriculum?
Or for approving new
The superintendent would bring recommendations to the board as part of the budgeting process, and the board would then, weigh in on those and approve them.
Okay, well, thank you. And I just wanted to let you know that we're excited to have the opportunity to provide more engaging offerings to our kids. So thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Do you guys mind if I stand? I'm not really a sitting person.
No, that's fine. If you can just come to the mic, just so
Sure.
the folks listening.
I was going to ask, can you guys speak louder because we can't hear you at all, and we're
Okay.
only halfway back. So if you could speak louder so we can hear. My name's Heather Graham. I teach first grade here at the primary school, and I am one of the primary school building reps, and I wanted to, union building reps. I wanted to take a moment to just highlight some of the amazing things that the faculty and staff at the primary school are doing, because I think it's important that you hear about these wonderful things that are helping our students to be more engaged in their learning. I'm going to start with third grade. Third grade has purchased, well, you guys purchased, new test prep kits that are more fun and engaging, so they're giving students an opportunity to be more engaged in test prep. They're also learning cursive handwriting, which means they're all going to learn how to do their signature, which is super exciting, because as adults, we have to sign our name everywhere. In second grade, they did Read Across America Day, where all of the classrooms came into the hallway and they read together as a grade level. In first grade, they celebrated either the 100th day or the 101st day of school, and they did different activities in their classrooms. And right now they're currently doing a March Madness book tournament in their classrooms so that the grade level is voting as a whole and picking their books. Our building also does a character ed calendar, and we have special Fridays, and 2 of the highlight Fridays in the last month for our students at the primary school has been Rockstar Day and Superhero Day. So I just wanted to take a moment to really recognize the teachers and faculty and staff at the primary school and say thank you for all of the things you are doing to go above and beyond for our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Why were some kids celebrating the 100th day and some the 101st?
To be honest, it's because some people feel that the 100th day kind of has a
different kind of feeling if we're celebrating being an elderly person. So they chose to do the 101st to represent everyone.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments this evening? Okay, thank you. Next up, we have our president's report. I just want to highlight a couple of things. I know I mentioned at least one of these when we met last month, but really just want to congratulate our winter sports athletes, our competitive cheer team. As you may or may not know, won sectionals in our first season having a competitive cheer team. So hats off to those ladies and that team for a really great season, and being able to go to states and experience that is a great accomplishment for them in year one. And I'm sure they've got big plans for next year as well. And then I think folks are aware of both our boys basketball team and our wrestling team also winning foothills and having some success in sectionals as well. So hats off to that group for a couple of great seasons. So looking forward to what they have in store for the future. With that, we can transition into our committees. First up is our personnel committee. Mr. LePan isn't here this evening to present personnel, so I can try to pinch hit for him, and Dan, if you want to fill in any gaps, but there's not a ton here in our agenda. There are a few resignations to note that are listed in your packets as well. There are a few appointments, especially to our mentors and mentees. I see we have some of those in the building tonight, so thank you for joining us tonight. And then there's some additional sports appointments that are still rolling in since we met last month as well. So Dan, anything else you want to highlight that I didn't cover in personnel?
Just want to say that we also have some appointments for advisors for some new activities for our students. So more opportunities for our kids as we're working through and out of COVID. I'm saying out of with a knock on wood. So continuing to add things to get more students engaged, that give them a reason to want to be here at school, something they can connect to.
Sure. Great. Thank you. Anybody have any questions on personnel?
What is this Vex V5 competition club?
Yeah, so Vex is Vex Robotics. It's a name brand, and there's very stringent regulations for that and supplies that have to be purchased. But it's robotics club.
Okay.
And they're going to compete.
Cool.
Happy to have that opportunity for our kids as well.
Any additional questions on personnel? Okay, as you know, personnel is done through consent, so if there are no additional questions, personnel will carry. Next up, we have athletics. Again, Mr. Gallen's not able to be here tonight. The athletic committee did meet this month. A fairly brief agenda, but again, recognizing winter sports success. We talked quite a bit about that, as well as plan for our spring sports. I think Mr. Carpenter has pretty much all of our coaches in line. I think we are still maybe perhaps searching for a modified lacrosse coach, with hopes that we'll be able to find that before the season starts. Additionally, there was some conversation about additional planning for strength and conditioning position, an additional PE position, which we've talked about the strength and conditioning piece for a while now. In the past, Mr. Medici had kind of had it a vision where that was an athletic trainer / strength and conditioning coach, and I think Mr. Carpenter has a slightly different version. So we talked about that. I think Dan will be trying to incorporate some of those into our budget process this year. We also talked about banners as well. So we've got some new championships to celebrate, obviously. We've got a new sport to celebrate in competitive cheer, and my understanding is that the banners that are there that exist, there's not the ability just to order an exact one where they're all going to match, right? And so I think Mr. Carpenter is looking to source either a whole new set of banners or try to get one as close as possible, and try to cost it out both ways and determine what makes the most amount of sense. And additionally, we talked about girls ice hockey. We talked a little bit about that in our last meeting as well. But there's a more clear interest, I guess, from the surrounding school districts as to who wants to participate and who doesn't. So it's certainly Mr. Carpenter's recommendation, and I think Dan's as well, that that we create and establish a merger with the school district listed to create the girls varsity ice hockey team in a similar format that the boys Rivermen team participates in. So quite a bit of stuff, I guess, in athletics. Dan, anything else you want to highlight, or Amanda, you were there as well?
I'm good. I'll say again, it's going to provide for some more opportunities for our students. That's what these things are for, especially the PE strength and conditioning position, which has been posted, and girls hockey. We want to be on the front of that, not on the back of that, to make sure that our young ladies have that opportunity as well. And we do have, it's 2 or 3 that are absolutely interested, who are competing in AYAHA, Adriatic Youth Hockey. AYHA, I've got one too many letters in there, but they're competing now, and we'd like to have them have the opportunity as high school athletes as well. So happy to have that on the agenda for the approval of that merger this evening.
Anybody have any questions on athletics? No? Okay, so we've got a couple of different mergers here to approve. So do I need to do these as separate motions, Kelly?
You can do them together.
Okay, so there'd be a combined motion for the approval of the merger with South Glens Falls, Corinth, and Warrensburg for the boys varsity ice hockey Adirondack Rivermen team, and then addition to establish the following merger with South Glens Falls, Bolton, Glens Falls, Queensbury, Saratoga Springs, and ourselves for a girls varsity ice hockey program. So I would entertain a motion to approve those 2 mergers.
So moved.
Thank you, Amanda. Second? Thank you, Crystal. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. That will carry as well. All right, enough of my talking. I'm going to turn it over to Crystal for an audit update.
Okay, thank you, Ben. So we did have a busy audit meeting this month, just continuing to work through building the budget and going through that process. I'll go through the treasurer's report and the ECA balances, and then I'll hand it over to Dan and Kevin for the budget portion. So on the treasurer's report, in the general fund, we had 4.3 million in receipts and 4.5 in disbursements, leaving us a balance of 3.4. And then our total cash and balance as of January 31st is 5.1 million. But it's kind of in a good position for the next few months, so long as state aid payments come in as scheduled. For the extracurricular account report, there was a little bit of activity there. The cheerleaders, as Ben kind of mentioned, are really expanding that program and doing a great job with it. They had a girls' night out event that was well attended, so there's a receipt in there for that event. And there's some other things, normal kind of movement in those accounts as we have sporting things and other clubs and activities going on. So that's always good to have. And then the monthly warrants are also in your board packet. If there's any questions on those.
Anybody have any questions on treasury report, monthly warrants, and ECA balances? No? Okay. So hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the treasurer's report. Thank you, Amanda. Second by Tim. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. That will carry. And Crystal, were you going to talk about the legal ad, or do you
I think
would like Kevin or
Dan
Dan?
and
Okay.
Yep, so we'll let Kevin start with the legal ad, and then we'll both kind of provide an update on the budget.
Okay.
Okay, each year we have to do a legal ad, which has to be in the newspapers at least 45 days before the budget vote. That's why we're approving this tonight. At the audit committee, we discussed within the legal ad, basically what it does is it states the dates and the times of the budget hearing, the budget vote. Also the propositions that you have. It's actually not the actual dollar amount of the budget yet, because the budget won't be approved by this board until April. But you have to put in there for the other propositions. Proposition 2 for us is the purchase of school buses, which is 266 passengers and 244 passengers, not to exceed $375,000. And then we also have a proposition 3 this year, which is the creation of a capital reserve account, which one of the things we're going to talk about in a couple minutes was noted in our corrective action plan for the use of fund balance. So basically, after doing some research on this, after discussing it with the audit committee, we're looking to create a capital reserve account with the ultimate amount of $250,000 in it, and to be funded with $100,000 this year. That's what the voters will be authorizing us, is to make a $100,000 payment into that account. The ad also notes the terms that are up, the 5-year terms, and who currently the incumbents of this that are there now. And there's also another piece in the ad, and it's each year we donate, or we pay the Hudson Falls Free Library $30,000. We have had a request. We discussed it at the audit committee. Got a lot of very good detail on their proposal. So the request was to go from $30,000 to $40,000 this year. And just from the responses that we got, I know we updated it so that it said $40,000. So by approving the legal ad, we will be approving that increase amount by the board there too. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask.
I guess I would just say, just kind of not a question, but just a note to share with everyone. So they did provide a lot of information as to what that increase was, kind of the rationale for it. Also, it's been several years since they've received an increase from us. And I guess at least the audit committee had felt that they just have a lot of really great programming. They're experiencing the same increases in rising costs that every other business is. So kind of for those reasons and the fact that they're such an asset to our community, we felt that it was a reasonable request on their part.
Any additional questions on the legal ad? Okay, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the legal ad.
I'll move.
Thank you, Mark. Something seconded by Crystal. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. That was great. Then I'll turn it back over to Dan and Kevin for the corrective action piece.
What do you want to do next?
Yeah, so we'll that's the corrective action, so we'll go there first and we'll do budget last. So,
Okay.
Corrective action plan, I'll start. Everyone knows that we did have to do one. We received notice from the state of New York about 10 days ago. They finally reviewed the corrective action plan that was submitted back in, I believe, October, and asked us to add a date to one of the transactions included in our corrective action plan. So the plan that you see, and Kevin, you can add any other detail that needs to be done. The change provides a date for one of the transfers. I believe it's a transfer to the cafeteria account. And that should satisfy their review and subsequent kickback of that plan for us to have resubmission. It does have to be reapproved by the board and then re-uploaded by Kevin and then recertified by me to the state of New York. So we'll go from there. Did I get it?
Perfect. And if you look at your corrective action plan, it's literally the changes in red. The actions will be completed by July 5th, 2022. That's the only difference. So.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on the corrective action plan? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Amanda. In a second. Thank you, Crystal. All those in favor? Aye. Great.
And then for the budget update, not a ton to update you on. We had a very different kind of budget year, and you heard me say this last month at our meeting too, where the state funding that was provided in the January budget for Hudson Falls looked very good, and continues to do so. So we've made some plans and have included all those items in our budget, including positions like the strength and conditioning and PE, including the positions that Mrs. French referred to, and providing additional staff and opportunities through extra courses taught by teachers for next year's high school students. Also some staffing at the middle school. There's several layers of this. It's all about opportunities for kids. That does depend upon the final budget when it's approved by the legislator, when the governor lets it get done, going back and forth, having the sufficient amount of state aid, the same amount really that we looked at in January, that we received in January on those first state aid runs. We feel strongly that that's where it's going to be. As you know, and here's the narrative for folks, and I said it last month, I'll say it every month until the budget is released by the state of New York. That money that was added to Hudson Falls as far as state foundation aid for our school is due to money that's been withheld from our school district for about the past 10 years. So that's why if you look at other districts in our area, you'll see that our increase was a much larger percentage. But that means we haven't had that money for the last 10 years to invest in our school, in our students, in our staff, in our programs. So our students have been without those programs. The other schools around us, when you look, they only got a 3% increase because they've been getting all that money all along. So this isn't, it's money that we're going to do great things with for our students, but that's where it should go, because really our students should have been getting pieces of that every year for the past 10 years. So you're gonna see that through our budget process. I've been transparent about that, but I wanna be transparent publicly about that while the camera's rolling. That's why that money's there, because we should have been getting it all along. I'm so happy that the governor stepped up in that governor's budget, put the number in the right spot to make us whole for the past several years where we were not. But it's difficult to explain that sometimes when you look at other school districts and why are they using that money to have more programs for students? Because that's exactly where it should have been all along. So I just want to provide that publicly. Aside from that, there's no other big changes that we talked about in budget at the audit committee, because now we're just kind of waiting. We're just kind of waiting. There was one additional position I talked about and expressed interest in having, and that was looking at our counseling team. And I did recommend at the last audit committee that be included in our budget planning as well. So that I did relay with Kevin. He was there. We talked about it, is included in our current budget planning. So again, just need that final budget to have that same number or close to that same number, and we're in good shape, and it is sustainable to do so.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions?
You covered it well.
Budget process timeline? Okay, great. Thank you for that update. Amanda, thank you for letting me know. I inadvertently skipped a piece of the athletic agenda. I mentioned the mergers for hockey, but I glossed over the proposed mergers for swimming with South Glens Falls, so that's something that we do every year as well. So just to make sure we have an official motion on that group, because I think I read the other two, but I didn't read this one. So we would also be looking to entertain a motion to approve the following mergers with South Glens Falls Central School District: girls varsity swimming and diving, co-ed modified swimming and diving, and boys varsity swimming and diving. These are not new requests; these are annual requests that we've participated with South Glens Falls for at least the last handful of years on. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve those mergers as well. Thank you, Crystal. In a second. Thank you, Heidi. All those in favor? Great, that will carry as well. There was no transportation update this month. There's nothing new to report there. But Buildings and Grounds did meet, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Galo for a B&G update.
Thank you, Ben. Exciting time for Buildings and Grounds. The rest of this month and into April, the bids will be going out. Hopefully we get the approvals from State Ed very, very soon. Bids will go out, and the plan is, at least as of now, that the recommendation will be going to the full board at our April meeting for the contract for the project. So that's great news. And then on the construction manager, we anticipate having that information go out, request for proposals, and have it go to the board for a final decision at our May meeting. So the rest of this month and into April, and then a little bit into May. Very exciting time, and hopefully we'll be on track to get this project started as soon as at least some of the things before the kids are gone, but as soon as the students are gone, the end of the school year, kicking into high gear on that project. So we're real excited about that.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Dan, anything you want to add?
We had a meeting today with a company called Day Automation. They work on state contract, but they provided information over the last 2 years, and we're getting close to actually implementing this on upgrading our surveillance and lockdown and card access systems. So the high school, the administrative cabinet met today in the library and saw a presentation on there's some nice functionality that's going to come to help us with safety and security in our buildings. And I know that you weren't part of that meeting today, Mark, but I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that we're always trying to make sure that safety and security is there when we're doing all of our projects. But that was a nice presentation today, and you're going to hear more about that. And at some point, we would probably have a presentation for the board on what some of that functionality looks like, and for our public, so they know what some of that functionality looks like going forward.
Okay, great. And additionally, there's a resolution here for the annual pesticide application and lawn program that Mr. McKeegan has submitted here as well. Does anybody have any questions on that? Again, this is something that you see annually. No? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Crystal. And a second.
Second.
Thank you, Mark. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, great. That will carry as well. And next on our agenda, we have our policy committee update. I'll turn it over to Amanda.
Just bring this up here.
You will see two policies in here for first reads. I'm gonna skip to, the second one, actually, the use of assistance animals. We recently approved a social service dog policy. There's a little bit of overlap with these two, but there is some different wording, so for now, we're gonna have both of them separate. So just, it's here for your first read, pretty self-explanatory. And then the other one that we have is FMLA, and I'm gonna actually let Dan explain that one.
Yep, absolutely. So, and there's nothing contradictory between the two animal policies either. There's overlap, but nothing contradictory, so we're in good shape there. More to come on that as we're able to look at it a little more closely. So the Family Medical Leave Act, the changes in there had to do with parental leave. Most of the changes had to do with parental leave. Really two areas of note. Access to parental leave for a full 12 weeks with pay for employees who have that much accrued time. The second of note is that we put language in there so that anyone who's out on workers' compensation leave also must use FMLA concurrently. So those are the two biggest pieces. And the work on that started last May, I think, April or May of last year.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to have that out for a first read. So we're looking to have it as a second read. If there's something that needs to be adjusted, let us know, and we can have it at policy committee next month. But it's been looked at quite a bit, is what I will say, through several meetings, and I think we're in a good place.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Also been reviewed by council.
Okay, that's it.
Anybody have any questions on policy? No? Okay, so, again, if you have thoughts, or edits, please shoot them over to, policy committee, and we'll review them, at our meeting next month, and then, if there are none, we'll approve these policies, next month. Next up, we have our Avex Cpr update, so I'm going to turn over to Heidi.
So, a couple of big things. The first is that we obviously are math optional now, since the last time we met as board, so that was kind of a big deal. And, also we had the ASBA meeting. The focus was on advocacy. Our own Superintendent Dan Ward was the moderator for that. It was a great panel. And in all of my years in public education advocacy, I've never heard anything like it. They were like, we've never had all of our requests funded and asked for. So it was a really, the year prior, I think you were at that ASBA meeting, right, virtually, it was like gloom and doom. They were not sure if we were gonna lose 20% of our funding. I mean, it was such a nice difference from a year ago. And then when we met as a committee, we talked about the directions we want to go with our community collaborative. And that's it in a nutshell, unless you have anything to add.
Anybody have any questions for, Heidi and the advocacy team? Okay. All right, thank you for that update. For new business, we do have a new scholarship request. So there's a scholarship request in the name of Margaret Petit Memorial Scholarship in the amount of $200 for 5 years. All the requirements are in your packets as well. It's always a great thing, and I think our community does a great job of creating and sponsoring a number of scholarships for our graduates. And anytime we can add to that bank and pool of resources, it's always an easy approval for me. So, but does anybody have any questions or concerns on this new scholarship request? Okay, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Crystal. I think seconded by Amanda. All those in favor?
Right.
Okay, great. You'll also see in new business, there's a MOA for a settlement with Hudson Falls Teachers Association. So you've heard Dan talk about this in his Friday updates. The actual agreement is here in your packets as well. I'd say at a high level, the language really concerns the opening of school and ensuring the proper scheduling and the proper pay periods that go with that scheduling in the first 2 weeks. So if you have specific detailed questions, because this is a collective bargaining agreement, we would need to move into executive session. But, and we're happy to do so if you do have specific questions. But again, I think Dan's done a nice job of, updating the group along the way through his Friday memos. So, does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns? Okay. Dan, anything you want to add to that?
So just, thank you to the Teachers Association for coming to the table so we could work it out.
Absolutely. Okay, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the HFTA settlement agreement in your packets.
So moved.
Thank you, Crystal. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Heidi. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, great, that will carry as well. And lastly, for new business items, you'll see the 2022-2023 calendar approval. Again, we do this every year. Dan, any highlights you want to call out scheduling-wise for the upcoming school year?
No, it's pretty standard. We've got our superintendent's conference days listed there. It follows the regular BOCES calendar, so that we're sure that our students have access to those programs. As you probably have all been made aware previously, BOCES puts out a master calendar, and most of the school districts try to follow them because those programs are vital to our kids having what they need.
Absolutely. Okay. Any discussion on the school calendar? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the 2022-2023 school calendar.
So moved.
Thank you, Amanda. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Crystal. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, great, that will carry. That concludes our committee updates. I'm going to turn it over to Dan for superintendent's report.
Yep, so I bulleted list and then a presentation, so I don't want to take away from the presentation time. Settlement agreement, you covered nicely, calendar, we're good. I just want to call out the drama production. We're getting ready to see The Drowsy Chaperone. I get so excited about this. Actually, my daughter's production at a school nearby is this weekend. I am looking so forward to seeing her on stage again and all her classmates. Same thing here. So good luck to those students. I just wanted to say that they've been working hard. They're in the auditorium every day, and it's going to be fantastic. And so fitting that we became mask optional shortly before the show. That had always kind of been the hope that would occur for people who are trying to perform on stage, although now we have to worry about makeup and things like that, where before we didn't have to worry about that. I'm sure they've got it covered, so look forward to seeing that. Wish Week committees, we've got a couple of note that I just wanted to put out there, and really just give people credit where credit is due. We've got on the Women in Trades Committee, we're well represented. Mike DiCaprio's not here tonight because he's with a Future Leaders group from Hudson Falls at a recognition event tonight. I am on that one, and so is Sue and Mrs. Cheesick from the middle school. So we're well represented on that. Really happy to be a part of it. And secondarily, there's a graduation requirements committee in the Wishwe-BOCES region. New York State's actually said we want to hear about graduation requirements, and we're certainly fixed on different pathways for students. Every student doesn't go down the same pathway. They're not gonna be successful that way. It's very apparent to us. So both Mike DiCaprio and I are on that committee as well. So just we're paying attention. We're trying to be part of the solution for our students and supporting them in any way we can towards graduation. And those are two great examples of how we're doing that. Safety drill and law enforcement. So I wanted to thank Kevin, and I also wanted to let everybody know that actually here in this building, Mr. Benefield held a lockdown drill, and inside of that lockdown drill, we also had a meeting with local law enforcement that Mr. Palenci set up, and it was a great time to talk through lockdown drills as we're coming out of COVID and we've always been keeping the eye on keeping students safe, but we haven't had a real lockdown drill in a while because of social distancing requirements, even during our drills. So we're trying to get there and be ready to roll with all those drills and make sure we're doing best practices. So we had members of the HFPD, Washington County Sheriff's Office, our own security team, our own SRO, as well as the state police there, along with a couple of building administrators who are on the safety committee. And halfway through our meeting was time for the drill, so they got to see the drill, and afterwards we talked about how the drill went and some things that we're seeing in this building. There's also plans for members from law enforcement to go and be at the drills at the other buildings as they occur throughout the spring. At the same time, we were having a presentation on an online system that's used to communicate during drills, as well as houses a lot of information that emergency responders would need. Where are your gas shutoffs, your water shutoffs, where are electrical panels, what are the entrances, where are the Knox boxes with the keys to access classrooms. So just a refresher for everybody, because our friends in law enforcement, many of them have turned over, and some new people. I think that Mr. Benefield would say the same, and so would Mr. Palunza, but worthwhile. We were also able to talk to them a little bit about the changes that are going to happen with our secure vestibules through the project, as well as our changes with surveillance access and key card access, and say that, you know, this is what's coming so that you know, and we're going to have to meet next year, relatively early in the school year, late September, early October, to talk about what's changed, so they know how to respond to our school district for any of our drills, and certainly if we need them for more than a drill. So we want to be on top of that. So I appreciate everybody's time on that. A special meeting, we have to have a special meeting each year for the BOCES budget vote and board elections. This year, the date is not decided by us, it is set by regulation. This year's meeting must be on April 26th. I sent out in my update that April 26th, we could do a virtual meeting at 8 a.m. As long as we can have a quorum. So we just need to have a short discussion on if we can have, what time we can have a quorum on the 26th. I'll do any time you want to do it, whatever works for you folks, I'll make work for me. But we have to make sure we have a quorum, we have to vote on that date. So the only hiccup would be is if the regulation for virtual meetings is somehow repealed by then. I don't foresee that happening, but if that does happen, we'd have to quickly pivot and do something in person on that same date. So I'll leave it open to you folks, or if you just want me to say 8 a.m. and see how many, or if there's a better time.
8 a.m. is fine with me.
Same, I put it on calendar.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
What day of the week is that?
That's a Tuesday.
Okay.
That was a great question. I didn't know the answer to it. So I'm glad other folks checked. Does that work? So that would give us a quorum. So we'll have.
I'll send the calendar invite out.
Yep. So we'll have Kelly send out a calendar invite, and we'll post it. That will be virtual only. So people who want to see it will have to see it online. That'll be the only item that day. We won't do any other business. Okay. Excellent. And then I want to turn it over to Dr. Bishop. She's here to talk about some of the data so far for Freshman Academy. So I'll turn it over to her, and I think, are you running them?
Kelly's helping me.
Kelly's doing it. Mike is at the other thing, and this is usually one of his. I can stand at the computer if need be.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the introduction on that. I know you've had a chance to go through the slides, or hopefully you've had a chance to pick through them. Really, my intention is to go over the information that I pulled, hopefully in all aspects that would be of interest for how we're functioning at the school year right now in Freshman Academy. It's really meant to be a high-level overview. I think any of the topics that are on here probably would be their own presentation. So if there's an area of interest that you find that would require any more follow-up or any more interest, just certainly speak up and let us know. And me representing this group is interesting in the sense that this has been a work in motion for a long time, prior to even my start here. And the people who did the heavy lifting and the legwork of getting it in motion are certainly the teachers and Mr. Benefield. So this transition of me getting involved in Freshman Academy is relatively new. So this is really just a kind of our checkpoint on where we're at about 7 months in. So feel free if you're comfortable speaking up for questions, or we can wait till the end if you have any comments, okay? Thanks, Kelly. Yep, again, just as an introduction, looking at, so we're all kind of on the same page when we're talking about what we're picturing when we're talking about Freshman Academy. Basically just that, there's an entire handbook that's developed that the legwork behind that came through work with the teachers that are currently assigned with Freshman Academy, as well as led by Jim during the last school year. And the idea of that was to have basically a backbone for the mission and philosophy for things like grading, discipline, social emotional learning, and the events for Freshman Academy. Forefront in the mind, obviously, the development was that transition from coming off of the COVID closure back into school entry. So that was certainly meant to be our guiding force for what it is that would be addressed at the grade level 9 of the students leaving middle school and what they experience coming into the high school. So just for a frame of reference, in terms of our high school, we're obviously a very busy building. There are 15 teachers with some degree of assignment to a grade 9 class, which I think is an interesting note. Obviously, we have people in other departments that function at other grade levels, but there are 4 teachers out of the 15 that have all grade 9 classes. So I just think that would be something of noteworthy point there. And when I was working with Mike on this presentation, just the idea of balancing the facts that are being shared and where we go from here, just the idea of a recommendation to consider, just now that we are in motion, what the evaluation of the handbook content does imply, and or is it on target? Should we be looking at other things that we thought were going to be a priority and maybe aren't, and or are we right on target and we're doing well and need further definition for things? So that's just one recommendation in terms of checking our own work to possibly consider moving forward. Transitioning to the students, I know you are aware of the fact that we have some students who repeat certain grade levels. So when we're at the point in time of developing this presentation, running numbers from guidance, we were talking about 192 basically included in the freshman numbers. So with that though, Mike was suggesting the idea of comparing who is going to be a genuine first-time freshman as opposed to those who are possibly retaking majority of classes. So that's that differentiation there. And just as a point of note, I know most of you are obviously familiar with the building layout, and ideally when we're picturing it here in-house, Freshman Academy, we picture F-Wing, we picture that being the main hub. And just for the idea of the practicality of that, I just thought it might be a point of reference that I pulled 3 different schedules just to see what from a student's lens that might look like. And so a typical student that may have an IEP, who receives services throughout the building just based on location, has about half their classes out of the F-Wing. A typical student who would have grade level expectations that would not require additional supports, the number of that student had 5 out of their 8 classes, so the majority of out of F-Wing. And then it just happens to be the way some of our teachers who are assigned for honors classes, we have that student is, the majority is out of F-Wing as well. So I just thought that would be a point of note, connecting it to a recommendation long-term. If this is something that we think that there is a point of reference of looking at it being a central hub, that might be something we want to look at, whether it's staff or physical location. So I just thought that'd be a point of reference for the students. And in talking with Dan, there was a point that we've been focusing on in other meetings as well in terms of just in general how our students participate in after-school activities, knowing that that's a big piece linked to attendance that we're monitoring for other reasons as well. So this is just a quick reference, checking with the advisors per club that we offer on who they had for freshman involvement. More often than not, when you see the smaller numbers, those are not repetitive students. So as an example, someone who's in Spanish club probably isn't the one that's in the ski snowboard club. That being said, the sports that are listed, it was common that there was overlap there. So it looks like if we look at our numbers, they're small in number. However, the fact that we have that many options is probably a positive. And obviously a recommendation would just be to continue to look for opportunities that students are both aware of and willing to participate in, and being able to shift and be flexible with what their interests are. One of the things specifically we're trying to work on with Will and Bill is the idea of what the transition looks like from what they're currently involved in 8th grade. How does that replicate and or connect well to 9th grade? And how do we preset those kids so that they know where to go and not have to maybe hear about it when they first get here. Try to ease that transition a little bit. So that's one of our focuses here. And regarding academics, again, this is one slide that we can take in a lot of different ways, but just trying to give a snapshot. In general in the building, there are grade level meetings. So every other week, there's going to be a focus on grade 9 academics, which would happen before school hours, before homeroom. And this is something that is meant to be academically focused when we're talking about this particular attendance and behavior. Those are separate days of the week that those would be mentioned on. But specific to academics, the idea of reaching out with parents, trying to have them involved if there's any sort of concern, also reaching out to guidance to bring them into the picture, and then discussing as a team what would be, compared to all the teachers that have the similar students, what would be a way that they would be able to recommend any suggestions that may or may not be working, and or other interventions to do as a follow-up. So that's a formal schedule that's in place. And it's meant to be ongoing. It's something that I've started to oversee as of October, and we are starting to now make it a little bit more flexible, where there's that rigid type of protocol piece of making sure we've checked all the boxes, but then also anyone available can also be brainstorming options as well. So academic focus is really a priority every other week with grade 9. That being said, when we are at the midpoint of our year, we do have numbers that we are still working on regarding our failures and incomplete listing. I don't think that's unique to grade 9. I don't think that's unique to Hudson Falls, and I don't think that that's unique to anything, just even regionally as to say, but it's just a number worth putting on there that we certainly are monitoring it, we're aware of, and in trying to come up with other accommodations and ways to work with the students to get them through that very important threshold of their credits in grade 9. Because obviously that's the pathway that, I know you mentioned pathways for graduation. We really have to see what we're working with and obviously get the most out of grade 9 as we can, so we can offer as many opportunities for our students as they move through each continuing grade. So that's a lot of hard work and focus that the teachers do and are aware of, and they work with guidance and parents as much as we can to try to figure out how we can move that forward on an individual basis with students. So again, just the idea of when we're looking at our grading practices, there's certainly intention in the handbook to have some flexibility with what would weight for a grade and things that would, how the percentage-wise that would go. So just, again, reassessing to see if we're on the right page, helping our students the best way we can. This is kind of a small one, I apologize. Attendance, again, I know this is more of a building-wide focus and in some regard a district-wide focus that we have people working on attendance specifically. So just in terms of a snapshot for grade 9, I had mentioned before that there are different types of meetings that happen weekly. Attendance happens to fall on a Wednesday. There's a general 9 through 12 meeting that would be something that would be addressing attendance, but then specifically with administrators, counselors, and some social work support, there could be student-specific situations that are reviewed as well. So on a student-specific situation, we track home visits, we track calls home, other interventions that are being done. So we do have groups of students and groups of interventions that are targeted based on the attendance meetings that we hold. The time I ran the numbers for chronically absent, I focused on grade 9. Mike had suggested just to throw in the other grades as well, so they are listed there as comparison. I know that's an area of focus that you are already monitoring, so they may be off a little bit based on times the numbers were run, but it's using that 5 lab program that we're using just in terms of a checkpoint for that. So when we're talking about recommendations to include that, I think when we're looking at bigger picture, our buildings typically have a child study team core group. The high school has a function of that, but again, it's split up sort of toward the topics that I was mentioning, such as attendance or behavior, or maybe something to consider possibly either at a grade 9 level and or building-wide level is having some sort of comparative team to filter those strategies through so that we all know the work that everybody else is doing, and it may be something that could consistently address things like the attendance and the academics. Discipline is not always a popular topic, but I did put it in there, and it's a little misleading. So when I ran the program through the 5 lab program that we're getting used to working in district, I was surprised to see the total number. So just for context purposes, where it says 300 referrals, that means that if there was a referral submitted and there was more than one infraction, each one of those refractions is counting as an issue or an incident. So the 300 does not mean there have been 300 times that there has been some issue that we've had to address. So that being said, I thought it'd be interesting when you see a number like that to see the types of things that we're addressing. The late to school piece is something we're working on with district office as a target regarding attendance. So we've been heavily documenting any conversations we've been having with students that are late, tardy, and or absent, and those are processed through our referral system for tracking to better help those further conversations in the other committees. So that's why that's the highest one there, most likely based on the situations we're seeing when students do arrive to school at times. The insubordination and did not abide by school rules, you can see is about half the number. And then again, just the other top 3 were the objectionable behavior and Mr. Skipped classes. In terms of the documentation, teacher's classroom hallway, those are the areas that we filter the most for our referrals. And just as a point of note, the ones that are connected to the late to school or anything attendance related is something monitored by administration that's using the same system as the teacher. So that 300 number is all inclusive of the hall monitors, our SRO, our teachers, and administration. So I just thought I'd expand on that a little bit. Social emotional learning I know is a topic that we've discussed here, and you guys certainly have discussed as a group as well. This is something that is part of the handbook. It's a high focus for the Freshman Academy philosophy and mission to address and to make sure is something that's embedded in the day-to-day functioning for our students. The suggestion at the beginning of the year was something to be rolled out through homeroom practices, which was something that we have, it's currently Jess Hogan at the high school that was overseeing it, and she was doing that type of management for all of our buildings. The function of doing it practically in homerooms received feedback in terms of all the other things that are trying to be addressed through homerooms and the timeliness of it and doing it well and doing it effectively. So we are in transition in terms of how formally social emotional learning is going to be addressed and available through the help of the BT. That being said, there are certainly teachers who still use our resources and embed them in their lessons as well. So if it's not showing up in a homeroom specifically, it may still be showing up throughout the school day with different groups of students. But again, that's a focus that we continue to know is important and be working together on how we're implementing that in the school day. Connected specifically to Freshman Academy, a part that was noted and planned for by that team that developed everything that should be a focus for this year, we're having specific student-centered events, which would mean supporting more of the community building piece of things, non-academically focused, having that bonding opportunity basically between staff and students. There's been an opportunity for 2 so far. The one in December was an in-house one that was more of a flexible holiday-oriented time where people had different events they were hosting in their classrooms and or movies, or to the extent that it was possible, I believe there were snacks and food. And the students had a pretty free day as far as something that they earned a break for. And then most recently there was a March event, which was off campus, and that was something that was staffed by the teachers that were able to go to that. And that was something that was all-inclusive. So students that may have had an issue regarding attendance and or discipline were all included in that, with the intention of meeting the goal of that being an all-inclusive target for grade 9. So with all of that and trying to move forward with social emotional learning, obviously addressing it is still appropriate, but the idea of looking at possibly consistent practices, whatever that may be in terms of where we are now and how the students are reacting with suggestions from BT. And then knowing that when we're talking about grade 9, they're coming out of the middle school where that No Place for Hate presentation was outstanding earlier in the school year, and we know that the students have great buy-in on that. And how is it that we can formally transition the roles that those students take on to have that be an active, right from the beginning point for them here. So that's the conversations with Will and Bill that we're trying to formalize. Thanks, Kelly. So I know I broke through each one, and hopefully you've had a chance to review them before, but if you do have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Hi, Mark.
What's the biggest challenge you are facing with Freshman Academy?
That would probably be a different answer from my lens as opposed to a teacher's lens. Consistency with, yes, attendance, I would say. And with that, I don't want to speak for a teacher's perspective, but I think the idea of all being on the same page for grading policies and or how work is completed and the timelines for when they can receive their credit, that is something that I think can always be a continued conversation so that the student sees that as a common area. So what I mean by that is what would earn an incomplete in one course might earn non-incomplete in another course. So I think that would be something for clarity when a student sees a variety of grades. That's one area that I think is going to be ongoing for them as they transition from the period schedule of the middle school to the block schedule of the high school, and what that means in terms of balancing that work. So that I don't want to speak for them. From an administrative lens, I would still consider it being attendance and just the consistency of getting them here every day and in the seats in front of the teachers. That's hard.
The attendance information was comparing the grades in the high school.
Yes.
How is the attendance in 9th grade compared to 8th grade?
We didn't run that. Mike and I, when I put it on there, that being said, I know from conversations, not having it formally on there, that the middle school is comparable to our school, because I think that's the intermediate school that's doing the best or is most successful with their grade level. So I do believe our comparable numbers are the same as far as middle school goes, which is not great in the sense of what the results are, but at least we're addressing the same issues, so.
And I would say, Mark, anecdotally, over the years, being in the middle school for 8 years and over here for 11, 8th grade, you start to see a die. That's where it really kind of starts, starts setting in, and then you see the pattern just continue, good or bad.
But no big change from 8 to 9.
Not usually, and I don't know this year, I'm just thinking, over the years that I've noticed,
So I just gonna, I'm gonna jump in
Sure.
just because I was able to pull it up quickly.
That's what I
while-
figured, you had that, I
Yeah,
didn't bring my Chromebook with me.
so if you, and you asked a question, and you'll be able to reference this too later on if you'd like. So if I look at Margaret Murphy at the K Center, and these numbers were run last week, so they're within a week. There's 56.3% of our students at the kindergarten center are chronically absent, which means they've missed 10% or more of the days of school that have taken place. That's how it's measured. At the primary, it's 51.3. At the intermediate school, 25.8. So that is our best performing school district as far as the number of students who are chronically absent. Middle school is second best at 33.8 of those students being chronically absent. And the high school, if you take the whole high school as a lump, it's 54.1. So it's an interesting curve.
Dan, can I ask a question from the audience? Is part of that, do you think, because the middle school and the high school changed classes so much, so they had so many more exposures?
I don't know, to be honest.
In a primary school, you're all in the same group of kids. In the high school, you're exposed to so many kids, so I feel like that's where a lot of our absences have come from.
Right, no, for certain, this does take into account absences due to COVID absences. I will say that there is a specific building that had more positives than others, and the attendance data is the converse to that, interestingly enough, which is odd. Without talking, I don't want to name buildings and COVID together, but it's interesting when you look at it. But certainly, we would want to look at attendance data going forward too, when COVID becomes less prevalent like it is now. And we all know that numbers are skewed, but I just wanted to provide that to answer
Sure.
that,
No, thank you.
question in detail.
I was just
so.
gonna go off of memory, so it's just
Yep,
as well that
okay,
you
I
have it in front
pulled
of you.
Once in a while, I can be fast with this.
Thanks.
Once in a while. I'll turn it back over to other questions
Sure,
for
or
Dr.
comments.
Bishop.
Oh,
So I have a comment that leads to a question.
okay.
So, and, sorry, I'm losing my voice. So, as a parent, I don't feel like I have a great grasp on like the balloon of social emotional learning. Everybody throws that comment around in that label and umbrella. But for me as a parent, I understand like cognitively, you have to make sure that a kid has their basic needs met so that they show up ready to learn. And I understand that. But beyond that, watching my kids go through the pandemic, a lot of times I feel like when I'm hearing social emotional learning, what that looks like to my kid is take away expectations, take away stress, take away standards, make everything easier so that they can manage. And maybe that's only the experience in my family. And certainly we have to be sensitive to that during COVID and the recovery from COVID coming up. What I'm interested to know on a long-term basis in terms of collecting a data point is at what point is there a tipping point where we can start talking about social emotional learning and also increasing rigor again so that academics are focused without becoming such a stress ball to students that we then have to pull them away. So I would just be interested in the future, like probably spanning 5 years, it would have to be longitudinal, but also by grade. How long do we really have to like have this major focus on social emotional learning before we can consider it just part of the curriculum and academics can then kind of return to the primary focus? Did that make sense?
It did, yeah.
Okay.
I would consider it more of a comment too than a true kind of question, because I don't think anyone would really have that answer. I think it's embedded in
Yeah.
when and if we get more of our feet under us collectively, then we know when to start assessing what the norms are again. And then, in my opinion, it'd be connected to what we're establishing for our culture. So I picture it being similar to like a character ed concept in
Right.
terms of like what it is that's acceptable here, how we treat, like, more of a broad picture like that than it is a lesson per se in reteaching. And I think hopefully that's, in my opinion, that'd be something that naturally comes over, to your point, time with exposure of getting back into the routine of what every day with everybody around you feels like.
What would
So-
like a concrete data point be to even look at that as a comparison? Or is it more of something that's so voluminous it would have to be subjective?
Well, again, from a, not to speak from a classroom lens, for me to speak from a classroom lens, but in the idea of, I would think in terms of, if that was something that was being addressed throughout a lesson, the idea of the frequency or the feedback or just in general participation that students engage in is something that a teacher would be able to see with their cohort. I think it would play out in a larger scale in a building from an administrative point of view, based on the types of conversations we're having with students and or visibility of positive actions or things like that. I think there's a way to at least have the conversation of seeing a positive shift when we see, if we're starting right now today using that discipline side as a point, what would it be in terms of what nature of concepts we're discussing a year from now or whatever it may be. I mean, it's something like that, if that's what a guiding team chose as a goal,
Right.
that might be the work that would go into that from an administrative point of view.
Yeah, yeah. If you had to give a lay person, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
That's okay.
I just
So we
like,
can
this
talk
is
later.
like, this is what I think about in
Yeah.
my free time while I'm driving.
Okay,
So,
fair.
if you had to give like a lay person, you know, like cover of a brochure of what social emotional
Sure.
learning is, what would that be?
I am defaulting to when we were returning back from our COVID closure, and it may have been pre-Dan, but I know Mike was here, when we were doing that training for staff and just honestly addressing their needs in terms of how it is that you're caring for yourself, being aware of what your own triggers are and or self-care means, and how is that when you're engaging with others. So just truly being aware of, yeah, I mean, there's certainly models out there that are adopted by the Wish We BOCES that other schools are using that's formalized, but I think the bigger concept is really just being aware of what your needs are, how to keep yourself both in check, and if you're not and in a need for support, where it is that you facilitate that, advocate for it, and knowing the whole time others are doing the same thing. So it's just truly that awareness piece is, I think, in my opinion, the key part of SEL.
Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome.
I guess I have a quick question. So in regards to like the failure rates and stuff, have you, obviously that's a point that's frustrating, I'm sure, for, you know, families and teachers and administrators alike. Is there a trend, or do we know what the trend is and how this ninth grade failure rate compares to something, you know, maybe pre-COVID, or like how much of it is because of that, how much of it is a whole host of other factors? Is there a way to kind of know that, or
There would be a way to know that, and that is part of the thinking when I was putting the big picture slides together that I was curious about. So it's something that we certainly can go back and do, and it's something guidance can run, and we could link that to summer school participation or enrollment in that, because I know that that's a key piece that then is a connection of an extension of grade 9 to hopefully address some of these in some cases. But I think, I don't know if it come to a conclusion of it being COVID pre and post, but I do think it'd be interesting to compare from year to year where our numbers are, because when we think about the reality of the students that we're talking about, if I'm remembering correctly how teachers have said it, I don't believe they've had a typical school year since they were in grade 6, which is prior to any sort of expectation that we have for grading, and especially being credit-bearing courses now. I mean, it's hard to compare that, I would say, but it'd be interesting in terms of like base number, what it would look like, just to see if we're tackling a whole new animal, or if we've had those types of numbers before. That's what, each of these slides I felt like could have been its own presentation.
Right.
So I was trying to just throw the pieces out there that might draw, you know, further interest. So that would be a good one. Sure, you're welcome.
Other questions for Dr. Bishop? No. Good. I'm calling it before Heidi starts again.
I know.
Thank you very much.
Sure, you're welcome.
That's the end of my report.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dr. Bishop. We do not have any anticipated need for an executive session tonight, so we have nothing further on agenda. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Amanda. Second by Heidi. All those in favor? All right, great, that will carry. Have a great night, folks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Kelly, can you do me a favor? Can you
Yeah.
just scan this and send it out to the board just so they can see it too?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.